when I first met the idea of collecting, and I think it was in school, when we learned about the Stone Age. I think that's actually my first recollection of collecting. Collecting, to me as well, has a psychological structure and meaning, because in my work I deal a lot with psychological structure, so I'm very interested in that, in why and what you're collecting. If you're not poor, it basically means fun, and you do it voluntarily. And if you don't have to collect in order to, satisfy a trauma, and it has, of course, this compulsive side, or it can have this compulsive side as well, which I think is rather interesting. Collecting can also mean that you collect ideas about yourself. Like if you read or whatever you experience, you collect experiences and you share them with yourself, and in order to become another self. So you could also say, I collect, therefore I am, because it can mean that you collect an idea and they transform you to something else, something better, something worse. But it has to do with the self, of course, the way I see it. I think I'm very interested also in people collecting curiosities, because it has also this compulsive structure often. But then I found that I'm rather interested in the people than the collection. For instance, I know a person, he's collecting teeth, and I'm more interested in the psychic structure than rather the collection itself. There was a time in my life when I personally collected, like always in my work, there's a story behind it. I grew up with a father who was really hypochondriac. During my childhood and during my youth, he was basically dying all the time. And one day he came home, and I think I was about 10, and he said, I just could stop breathing and drop dead. And until now, he's now 78, and I was 10 back then, now I'm over 50. Like when I'm at home at my parents, and my father, what we do in the evening, sometimes we watch TV, he usually falls asleep. I catch myself looking at him and looking if he's still breathing. So, of course, I don't want to use the word trauma, because nowadays everything is a trauma, but it wasn't the best experience in my life. But that led me to a rather funny collection. I was collecting books on incurable diseases and on mental health issues. And I have read those books, and that's not a very good thing, actually. But I stopped collecting them when I think in my late 20s, and I threw them away in the beginning of my 40s. I was talking about that it's voluntarily. There's often also collecting is often non-voluntarily, So I was raised by certain circumstances, and those were the people who were supposed to love me, But it caused a certain damage, of course. And then, in order to, escape this damage, some collections, I would call it collections, actually, were necessary in my life. And I'm rather happy about it that right now I can say I'm not collecting anything. It's more rather immaterial stuff I collect. In my works, I often narrate about people who collect immaterial stuff, or they do stuff and there is an immaterial idea behind, and it has often a compulsive side. For instance, in this work with crystals, I describe a person which I call Uncle in my film, and he needs to collect and he needs to create certain crystals in order to remove traumas. So he constantly builds crystal structures, often with burnt wood. My mother was smoking, and she was lighting her cigarettes with matches. So when he came to our house, he was collecting those burnt matches and constantly created different crystals. Those crystals had different meanings. Nobody knew the meaning, but it was very clear to him, of course. And in the story, I tell that everybody in the village starts to only do the structures, so nobody worked anymore. And of course, this is a symbolism of something changing, of a change that in order to, what I talked about, to escape the structure, so leave a certain structure behind. So this collection for him was a necessity, and of course it was not voluntarily, but it meant to, be alive.